Hi everyone, Elsie Jensen here. Today we are going to make an Italian wedding soup with banana muffins using our sourdough discard and prep up some salami melts. So let's start our meatballs going for our Italian wedding soup. It has little meatballs in it. So we're going to take one slice of just any type of soft bread with a soft crust. We're going to put it in our bowl and we're going to add one egg in here. And we're going to add some half and half to kind of soak up the bread to where it's soggy but not drenched. And this is going to be in lieu of breadcrumbs, because I find breadcrumbs can really make your your meatballs dry. And so I like to use bread soaked in milk. And then, of course, we'll use 1 egg per pound. So 1 slice of bread per pound of meat and 1 egg per pound of meat. We're going to put our soggy bread. We're going to add about a teaspoon to a teaspoon and a half of garlic salt. This is what's going to season up your meatball. Then we are going to add a little bit of black pepper, about a half a teaspoon. There we go. And then we're going to add in some Italian spices. We're going to add about 2 teaspoons. And now we're going to add in some fresh herbs. We're going to use the tips of our green onions here, and we're going to just add in a few little snippets of green onions. Just try to cut them nice and thin. This will add a pop of color and delicious flavor to the meatballs. So we're going to put the rest in our soup. So we're just kind of cutting up the tips of it. We're going to also put some fresh oregano in our meatballs for our Italian wedding soup. So I'm going to grab just 1 stalk, and we're going to just pull all the leaves off of this, which is going to be about a tablespoon of fresh oregano. Just make sure you don't get that stalk in the middle. Just try to pull off those fragrant leaves. There we go. So you see how we got them all off the little branch here. And then I'm just going to snip these into our batter here for our meatballs. Just doing some nice little fine little snips. This is just going to add a really lovely flavor to the meatball. You could also just mince them up on the cutting board, but this is just simple enough. They don't have to be super delicate and little. There we go. And last but not least, a little bit of fresh Italian parsley to go in here as well. I'm going to pull off about a tablespoon of the leaves, leaving the stalks in there. And then we're going to just, again, just like the oregano, I'm just going to snip them in here with my kitchen shears. And this will add a lovely burst of flavor to our meatballs, as well as some nice little color. Let's pull this stem out. We don't want any of those stalks. Those are a bit more chewy. Okay. And then we're going to get in here with our fingers, and we're going to smush it all together. So you see how we're going to make a nice little paste here until once we get that all there, then we're going to add in our veal. So we're using veal today, a pound of it, but you could also use a pound of ground pork, or you could do half ground pork and half beef. You can use beef, but I find that pork or veal tastes just a teensy bit better. There we go. So now we've got our very herby paste. So let's use our kitchen shear. We're going to open up. We have 1 pound of veal, and we're going to mix this into our meat and make our little meatballs. Again, you could use ground pork, and if you don't have ground pork or veal, you can use a ground beef. But I will say veal or pork, I think, make a nicer flavor with our meatballs. Put my shears in here. Now, the only way with meatballs is you really got to get in there. And so you're going to get in here and you're going to really be squishing the meat, the veal between your fingers, because you want to get that eggy and bread paste through it all. That's going to be the binder that holds your meatballs together, as well as all of the lovely flavors for our soup. There we go. So now it kind of looks like I'm getting my meat all the way dispersed, like all that kind of herby season through it. And you can see it's like comes together. It's kind of got a stickiness from that egg and bread paste. And now we're just going to make little meatballs. So just pinch off a little bit and give them a small light roll. They're going to shrink up some when they cook up. And these are what's going to go into your soup. And I make mine a little bit bigger than like traditional Italian meatballs for their like Italian wedding soup, simply because I don't want to take the time to roll out the micro ones. So I like them to be bite size. I don't want them to be any bigger than like a gumball, but these will shrink up to be smaller. But the ones they can make them, they're really teeny tiny, and that just is a lot of work. So give it a little roll. If you want your meatballs to be a really perfect shape, you can oil your hands and then they will roll into a really smooth ball. But I find just doing it this way, they taste just as good. And then we're going to pop these and we're going to bake these in the oven for a few minutes at 400. Before we add them to our soup. And the reason I bake them instead of just putting them in the boiling pot is they hold their shape much better if you pre-bake them. And they kind of keep their flavors in, I feel. So we're going to get these rolled out. And then we can start, we'll caramelize up our onions, and then we're going to start on our batter for our banana muffins, because earlier this week I did like a Amazon Fresh order, and I wasn't really like paying attention when I ordered bananas, and I just thought I had put in like 6 individual bananas. Turns out I put in 6 bundles of bananas. So we ate through about 3 bundles, but we still have a lot of bananas left and they're going bad. So we're going to start our banana recipe kickoff. We're going to do some banana muffins today. I'm sure we'll do banana donuts. Might do banana chocolate muffins, which are delicious, and banana bars, but we'll see how far. Probably freeze a couple down for smoothies, right? I like to freeze bananas right when before they go too brown, but they're still like good. You freeze them down and then you can just blend them up with fresh fruit and they make like the best smoothies. Okay, let's put this guy on there. I'm going to give my hands a quick wash and then we'll pop those in the oven. Okay. So we have our oven preheated to 400 degrees. So we're going to pop these in the oven, let them start baking up, and then we are going to we'll mince up our onion real quick so we can have that start to caramelize, and then we'll do our banana bread, our banana muffins. So we've just got these in here. And these won't take too long to cook, about 10 minutes or so, because they are smaller. If you make them bigger, you need to cook them longer. If you make them even smaller, they'll cook up faster. You just don't want to overcook your bananas, or not your bananas, your meatballs. My brain's already jumping ahead to the banana muffins. We're going to put about 1 tablespoon to 2 tablespoons of olive oil in our Dutch oven here. And I am just going to dice up our yellow onion so we can have it start caramelizing, so it will make a nice broth for our Italian wedding soup. Because you really want to, when you're making a soup and you're going to have, or you have time to caramelize and like saute up the vegetables, you want to really get those onions in there, get them caramelized. It's just going to let out all their delicious flavors and give you a much nicer, richer broth. Okay, let's pop these in here, and then I'm just going to turn my heat on to that, and we can start on our banana muffins. Okay. So before I had ordered bananas, I already had 2 bananas that were going south, and then we're going to go from here. So this one uses 3 bananas for it. We're just making about a dozen. So I'm going to pull off the tops. I'm going to give them a nice squish first. I like to do that so that it's easier to mash them up. And I like when my bananas get to about this one. They're not rotten, but the sugars, the natural sugars in them have really sweetened up. So this is my most ripe one from that bunch, but I want them to ripen up another day or two. But I'm going to give it a good squish and pull it in here. So the browner the bananas get, the more sweet they will be. We're going to take a fork here, and I'm just going to mash through my bananas with this fork. That way I don't have any big chunks. Okay. And then we're going to add in 1 cup of brown sugar. And I'm going to be using light brown sugar. Okay, so we've got our bananas mashed up into a nice kind of thick banana paste. When I add in our sugar, it will cause the bananas to get a bit more soupy. So we're going to add in 1 cup of firmly packed brown sugar. So this is a 1/2 cup. And then give another 1/2 cup. There we go. So we've got 1 whole cup of brown sugar. This is where with the bananas and the brown sugar, that's where all the sweetness is coming in from these. If you don't have brown sugar, you can use just regular, like granulated sugar, but I would cut back and use maybe like just a little bit over 3/4 of a cup.
Do you have a question? Do you have any specific times that you go live?
We typically go live around 1:30, 1:40, 1:32ish during the weekdays for like a lunch stream. That's our most consistent time. And then in the evenings, it's between 7:45 and 8:15. Just depends on the kids' sports and activities. Yes, Central Time. So, because that's when I get home and I have time to start prepping and getting ready for dinner. I'm going to give my onions a little stir here for our Italian wedding soup. And then just want to coat them in the olive oil, get their caramelization. Oh, yes. Also, if you miss our lives, we do post them on the link on our page. We upload the videos about an hour to an hour and a half, just depends on how long it takes to download. So we've got our we've got our bananas, our 3 bananas and a cup of brown sugar. We're going to add 1 egg. And I will say sometimes we do a 2-part one in the evening because a lot of meals need a little bit of prep, or I'll do something in the Instapot, like cook up the meat, or we'll make like a dough for it. So sometimes we do one a little bit earlier and then we have the finishing one. Okay, we've got our egg in here. Now we are going to add in our sourdough discard. We want a 1/2 cup of sourdough discard. And this is going to give it a nice kind of that tart flavor to it, but also is going to keep it very moist. Yeah. And it's a great way to use some of your starter when you need to feed it up. So I'm just going to go through, give it a nice little whip with my fork. And then we're going to just switch to my spatula because once we get to our flour, you don't want to over mix that because that's going to lead to a stiffer banana bread bending. Okay, we're good with our fork. Let's add in a 1/2 cup of melted butter, which is the same as 1 stick. I'm using salted butter because I love salted butter. And I never, I feel like baked goods always need a little bit of salt in to really bring out their flavor. So I don't buy different ones. There we go. Let's stir it in. And then we're going to add in our baking soda, our salt, and our baking powder. And then last, we'll add in our flour and mix. Oh, we're also going to add in a bit of cinnamon. Let me give my onions. Don't want them to burn. They're starting to caramelize. I'm just going to turn my Dutch oven down to about a 4, and we're going to let those slow cook for a minute. Okay. Oh, I forgot to grab my measuring spoons. We need a teaspoon of baking powder, a teaspoon of baking soda, and a teaspoon of salt, and a teaspoon of cinnamon. I'm running low, so this should probably be the last of my baking powder. So I had just about a teaspoon in there. Gotta rebuy that. Now we need a teaspoon of baking soda. So this recipe has a bit of a higher baking soda count. It has a little bit less eggs, but bananas need a little bit more help because they're a bit denser. And so the baking soda really helps them kind of rise. We're going to use a teaspoon of salt and a teaspoon of cinnamon. We're going to give this a nice stir. Then we're going to add in 2 cups of flour, and they'll be ready to scoop up into our muffin liners. Now, if you wanted to add in chocolate chips or walnuts, once we add in the flour, you could fold those in, but my kids just like their banana muffins straight up. Give this a good mix. You just want to make sure that baking soda and that baking powder gets mixed in well. And I like to add them into my wet batter. That way I don't have to take the time to sift them into the flour. You just got to make sure they get mixed up well. Now we're going to add in 2 cups of all-purpose flour, and then we'll give them a nice stir until they're just incorporated, making sure not to over mix them. So we have a nice soft, fluffy muffin, and then they'll be ready to bake. So we got our 2 cups in there, and we're just going to stir these in. Again, I'm always going to say you want a chunky, lumpy batter versus a smooth one when it comes to our muffins, because you want them to be fluffy. And when you're using butter in your batters, if you over mix them, they begin to get firmer or stiff.
You have a question. What's the difference between all-purpose and self-rising?
So self-rising flour has baking soda added into it, and so when you bake it, it rises. So you don't want to use that, because then you'd be adding like the double amount of the baking soda that you need. Okay, so here we've got our nice thick batter, and our batter is much thicker than if you were using oil. You'd have a thinner batter, but I like butter in my baked goods. Okay, give my onions a quick stir, and then we're going to scoop these up and bake them. So a lot of recipes use self-rising flour, and it's already been like a pre-mixed with baking soda. And since I add it in, I don't like to buy a bunch of different flours. I just always mix it in there. But you don't want to add extra unless you have a recipe that already dictates needing more. So you don't want to make that. Otherwise, whatever you use the self-rising for, if you're using it in place of all-purpose, you're going to get really puffy, like cookies or puffy bread, or it can have even a bit of a bitter taste from the baking soda. Let me grab a big spoon. I like to use metal spoons to scoop my batter into their cups, because I find that it scoops in much nicer. And I also like to fill mine up to the top. When the butter melts, they will kind of flatten out. They won't be as big, but they'll get this nice big dome. So we'll go back over and even everything out towards the second round through. But I do like a nice big dome on my muffins because that's the best part of the muffin is the top. I've always thought, they make those like muffin top pans where it's just a small base and it has a thing. I guess it's called like a muffette. And I'm like, oh, I should get those because everyone really just loves the top of the muffin. Here. And this recipe makes a dozen. Now, if you wanted to fill them up a little bit less, you could probably stretch it out to about a dozen and a half. But I always try to make my muffin recipes be right at 1 dozen. That's why our family will eat them up in a day or so. There's about 9 to 11 mouths I feed every day. So a dozen is perfect for everyone to have one and for a few lucky ones to get a second. Okay, let's scoop our batter in here. It's a little bit sticky. There we go. And now I'm just going to take in, I just have a little bit. We're just going to try to even it out so that they all kind of bake up the same. If you're going to have any muffins that you want to fill slightly less, these middle two, if you fill them slightly less, they'll cook up perfectly at the same time as the other ones because they don't get quite as much heat. So if they have a bit less in, that's the best way to do it versus overfilling your middle ones. Okay, let's go get these in the oven. Okay, so I'm going to pop these in the oven at 400 and they're going to bake for 18 minutes. Let's grab, and I think I give these a test, see if they're ready. Those are nice and firm. So our Italian meatballs are ready to come out for our soup. Put these here. And then I'm going to set the timer so I do not forget for 18 minutes. Okay, let's go finish up our soup. And so we can put our little baby meatballs in there. And they have a nice little Italian kind of seasoning for them. Here, we've got our onions to a nice caramelization here, which is what we want because it's going to really bring out the lovely flavors of the onions in our broth. So we're going to add in a good spoonful of garlic, about 1.5 teaspoons. We're going to let this, give it a stir and let this saute up. Have those flavors come out. And we're going to dice up some celery. Since these were already like the pre-washed, pre-cut ones, I'm just going to take off the ends of them because those tend to get more stringy. So they get dehydrated after being that's where all the water comes out first. And do kind of a small slice on these. That's where all the water comes out first. And do kind of a small slice on these. You could put necessary. Here we go. I'm going to put those right in here with that onions and those garlic. We'll give this a nice stir. Let those saute up. And now we are going to peel up some carrots and chop them up and add them in. And then we'll be ready to kind of do our broth part of this. So give these a good peel. This soup has a good amount of carrots in it, which gives you a nice bright color, which contrasts with the spinach that we'll be adding in there. So it makes it a really pretty looking one. We're going to be using orzo today. Typically, Italian wedding soup has these little small ball pastas called pepe de pasta or something like that. But I had orzo on hand, it's similar. It's not a true thing. Or they also have these little teeny tiny round noodles that you could use. But again, I just like to use what we have in our pantry versus going out and buying, new stuff. And I have some orzo, so we're going to use that instead of the traditional pasta for it. So we're getting this. You want to make sure when you're using like full carrots like this to give them a peel up, that outer skin is just doesn't have as much nice flavor. It's drier, and you want the nice moist tender parts. So we're going to cut off their bottoms and we're going to cut off the tops. And for our little bits of the carrots that are kind of sticking out, these smaller, thinner ones, I'm just going to chop them up, and then we will halve and maybe quarter some of our carrots because you want them to cook up fairly fast, so you don't want them to be too thick. And put these first bunches in there. And now this guy's a little fatty, so we're going to cut him apart. There we go. And we're going to quarter this carrot as well. So if they're not super fat, you can just have them. But these are some thicker base ones. And I want all of my carrots to be around this size, not too big. And that way they get nice and tender in our cook time. There. And I like to saute all of my vegetables first before we add in the broth. That just brings out for a richer flavor. It helps bring out some of those veggie flavors versus if you just throw them into a pot of boiling water with spices. This really allows the flavors to come out, makes for a much nicer soup. Really helps elevate it. There we go. So quarter this guy because he's thicker. And then we're going to mince up some fresh spices to add in here, as well as some dried spices for our soup. I like to always heat them up with a little bit of while we're sauteing with that oil in there. It just helps bring out those natural flavors better, makes the broth a little bit more flavorful. Okay. Let's get these carrots in here. Get a good saute on them. Now, I will not throw my spinach in yet. The spinach is something that I throw into the actual broth because spinach wilts really quickly and there's no advantage to, sauteing it up. Okay. I'm going to take 2 bay leaves here and we're going to just crush them up. And this is just going to allow their flavors to come out. And when you crush them up, they soften up a little bit faster and you don't notice their little crunch versus when you leave them whole, you kind of have to fish them out because they stay firm. Let's throw these carrots away. And then we're going to mince up some fresh herbs for our broth. But let's put a little bit of Italian seasoning in here, about a teaspoon. And about a half a teaspoon of black pepper. And you could always add more if you like it a little bit. Do a quick little shake of garlic salt. I'm going to give it a nice stir. And so that way the heat can really touch those dried spices. With the fresh spices, it doesn't matter so much, but the dried ones, you really want to have them hit the oil for it. Okay, we're going to use some fresh oregano. So just make sure you get those stalks off because those will be chewy. And they don't have the good flavor that the leaves do. I will say there's really no great way to de-leaf herbs. You just got to kind of pick them off by your hands. It's the best way. So we just want about a tablespoon of fresh oregano. Now, if you don't have fresh, I would say use about a teaspoon of dried. Dried is a bit more potent in there because when it dries up, it has a lot more in it. Because, they get smaller once all that liquid is dehydrated out of them. We're going to give it a nice mince here. And we're going to add this in. And then I have my 2 green onions here. We're going to mince up these and throw them in here as well, because we kind of use the top parts for our meatballs. Okay. And we're going to save, I have fresh basil and parsley, but we are going to add those at the end. So we're going to give this a good stir. And now we're going to add our broth in for our Italian wedding soup. So let me reach in here. We're going to be using, I'm going to put 4 cups of water in and then a big heaping scoop of chicken bouillon. But you could also use straight up chicken broth if you wanted. You just have to add some salt to your soup. You could also use chicken bone broth. But I am a big fan of chicken bouillon because I can add more chicken flavor with less liquid. We're going to have a nice big scoop. And this is where most of the salt comes in for my soup as well.
You have a question? Do you know what you're cooking for dinner yet?
I haven't completely figured out, but I'm going to be using a pork roast. And I think we're going to do a 2-parter tonight because I want to make some Italian Easter bread, and that needs to rise. So I think we're going to do like a quick one around like 4-ish to prep it so I can put the pork roast in the Instapot so I can get it nice and tender. But I haven't figured out what I'm doing from that. So it's a process here. I got to think about it, feel what I'm into tonight. We got our soup here. This is our broth. I'm going to let it come to a nice boil. And once it simmers for a little bit, then we will add in some orzo and our meatballs. But you want to add those in towards the end so they don't get bland. Okay, we're going to let that come here. Let's get our stuff for our melts, because I love to dip my sandwiches into a nice broth. So let me just clear this out of the way. Okay, so we are going to use up some of our sourdough we baked up last night. And then we're going to do some Gouda and salami because I felt like that fit well with our soup. So we've got, this is our traditional loaf. We baked up and ate some of it last night.
Why don't you tell them how much is left of the other?
So the other one is like almost gone. I've been picking at it. This is our chocolate cherry loaf that I baked up last night. And it is so good. We have less than half of it left, and it is so delicious. I know, because I keep picking at it. I keep coming over. As you can see, it's being picked away at. That's by me. Every time I walk by in the kitchen, I'm like, I want just a little piece because it doesn't count if you pick at it. Okay, let's grab our sourdough here. Oh, I did the cool little stripe pattern on it, and it's supposed to be considered a zebra stripe. But I have to say, I agree with my husband. It does look more like a chipmunk's or a ground squirrel stripe on it. Maybe he's onto it, something here. Maybe I should have him score our sourdough. Maybe he'll be an expert at it.
We call it the Rescue Rangers.
They're delicious. Okay. So we've got our slices of our sourdough. We're just going to spread a little bit of room temperature butter on each one. There we go. And a little goes a long way. And this is just to give you that nice kind of crispy crust on it. I don't like to put butter on my skillet, otherwise it just burns. There we go. Get a slice here. Then we're going to use some Gouda because it's the best. My husband, for the longest time, convinced me he didn't like Gouda, and then wasn't telling him, I'm like, just try it. And it's now one of his favorite cheeses. So, you know, can't knock it until you try it. It's a great cheese that has such a mild flavor that it's really it works well for melts because it doesn't overpower all the other stuff in it. You know, like I love cheddar cheese on like just a straight up grilled cheese, or if I'm doing like a ham and cheddar recipe. But if I want like a salami or a different type of meat, you need a milder cheese that has a good melting point. And Gouda and Havarti are two cheeses that I think work really well for it. We're going to put some Genoa salami on it. And remember, you don't want to go super thick on your salami or any of your sandwich meats because you do want your cheese to melt up nicely. So a nice thin layer. And I find salami packs a lot of flavor in a small amount, so you don't need to go crazy with it. There we go. And then, of course, our little second layer. And it looks like our soup is starting to get a nice simmer on it, which is perfect. And there we go. We're gonna got our sandwiches here, our little salami melts, our Gouda and Genoa salami melt. The difference between Genoa salami and hard salami is very, very mild. You can very tell the difference. But I find hard salami, it's a smaller sliced salami, so it's a bit smaller circles, but it has a bit more seasonings. I think Genoa salami is a bit more mild. Okay, let's get ours cooking up right here. Look at this. We're going to add a nice stir. We've got a nice simmer going. And now what we're going to do is we're going to add in some orzo so it can start cooking. So orzo it kind of may confuse a lot of people if they're not used to it. It looks like rice, but it's actually a pasta. So it does contain gluten, but I'll put some in my hands. But you can see it looks just like rice, but it actually gets a little bit bigger when you put it in there. We're going to put you don't need too much in here since this isn't a big one. So I'm going to put about 1/4 of a cup, maybe a pinch more, like 1/3 of a cup into our soup. Now, traditional Italian wedding soup has like the pasta di pepe, which are little teeny pearl-like balls. Or there's also the ones where they almost look like somebody took a macaroni noodle and like chopped it up into really like thin circles. But orzo is a good substitute. There we go. But as always, when you're adding pasta to soup, you need a lot less than you think because it absorbs that broth and it gets bigger. And I know I made the mistake in the beginning of adding, a lot of times I'd add way too much pasta and then it goes zoop and you have like no broth. Okay, let's get our fresh herbs cut up and then we'll have our spinach. I'm going to use the last bit of finally went through my package of basil here. We're going to chop up some fresh basil, some fresh parsley, and we'll add spinach. We'll add those all towards the end, but I want to have them minced up and ready to go. I'll also add my meatballs in towards the end. That way you don't lose all of their flavor in them because the flavor will stay in them nicely, but if you are cooking the meatballs, like if you still have it over a high heat boiling, they tend to lose their flavors and more likely to fall apart. So you want to add them in right towards the end. So let's mince up our fresh basil here. There we go. Nice and fine. And then we want our parsley as well. So I'm going to try to pull off as much leaves away from the stalk. When I get down to the very end of my parsley, it's typically like 10 leaves and then all stalks because I like to pull them out. That way makes cleaning them a little bit easier. But you want to see these stalks, they don't cook up, they don't get tender in your soup. So they do have the parsley flavor to it. It's not as strong, but their texture is it's just not as nice. It's not as delicate. So I always try to take those thicker stalks off. There we go. I will say I'm getting ready to start our herb garden here. We had this, I almost started it last weekend, and then we had, of course, the frost. Every time I say I'm going to start it, it freezes. Then I'm like, okay, it's Easter this weekend. There's no more snow. There's no more cold nights. I'm ready for Tennessee to literally tell me that it is time. Because I was looking at some garden containers for our runs. Because a couple years ago, I want to say like eight or so years ago for Mother's Day, my husband and the older kids built me these amazing garden boxes outside, and but they're starting to like rot. We did it with wood. So I'm looking into these, I guess they're called like the Vego systems, but they're the metal gardening boxes. And I was like, ooh, we should get some of those to replace some of the ones I have. And I'm like, and I was looking at them like, oh, they have an 8-foot one. This will be great. But I'm like getting all excited. And then my daughter, Evie, she wants to do a fairy garden. And I was like, okay, we can make a fairy garden too. Let's get, beautiful, nice firm tops on them. Okay, here are our gorgeous banana muffins. That brown sugar in them gives them such a rich and gorgeous color. And I just love that kind of molassesy undertone that the brown sugar gives. I prefer it over, granulated sugar in here, but they are just absolutely gorgeous. You see how they puffed up nicely? That's because we filled the domes of our sourdough discard banana muffins up to the top. And that rich golden brown, again, is from that brown sugar and that hint of cinnamon, but they make for the most delicious banana muffins, which I hope my kids are excited for because they're going to be having a lot of banana muffins. Okay. We flipped our grilled cheeses. We're getting towards the final stretch. We're going to add our spinach in now. So I have about a half a bag of spinach, but you want about 4 cups. We're going to add it in 2 batches. We'll do the first one in. We're going to give it a stir, and then we'll add the second one in. Because I find if you just put it all right on top, sometimes your spinach will clump together into nice, like, thick chunks, and we don't want that. We want it to kind of be spread throughout. There. Okay, we're ready for our next one. You could also use kale if you wanted. You just would want to add it in a little bit earlier. Kale needs a little bit quicker, a little bit more time to cook up to make it nice and tender, but it is a great substitute for it. Before we add our last spices, I want to just check to see if we need to add any more salt or pepper to it, because I like to get the final taste before we add in the herbs. Maybe a pinch more pepper. Maybe just a pinch. I will say, as I've gotten older, I like more and more pepper in my food. I used to be like, no pepper, it's too spicy. And now I'm like, ooh, more pepper. It really does enhance the flavors. Okay, so let me flip our grilled cheese and our salami melts. Oh, I lost it there. And then, almost toasting that. I just fell apart both times. There we go. Okay. Now we got our Italian meat. This is our Italian wedding soup, but of course, pan's nice and cool down. It's time to add our delicious meatballs that we made. So these are veal, and you can see they did shrink up a good amount. So they're made with veal, 1 egg, a slice of bread, Italian herbs, fresh parsley, green onions, fresh oregano, salt, pepper for just the perfect flavor. We're going to add them into our soup here. I used veal because I find that it's really delicious, and I know it's hard to come by, but pork is a pretty good substitute, and beef is my last resort for it, but the pork and the veal, those are good. Okay, let's stir this in. And you can see our orzo, it's already getting like more fluffy and bigger. Now, let's add in our fresh herbs, and we are almost ready here. So here we're going to add in our basil first. So we have about a tablespoon of fresh basil minced up, and then we have about 1/4 of a cup of parsley. Basil has a little bit more flavor than parsley, and so I like to add a lot more parsley, and it gives a lot more flavor. It makes it very happy and a nice bright flavor to it. It's a mellow flavor, but you got to add it in towards the end, otherwise it disappears. There we go. Perfect. We're going to turn that down to a low and let it simmer for just a second as we check on our melts here. They are almost done. Perfect. Turn this down. See, we've got a nice and hot. Flip it over, and I'm going to get a plate and a bowl, and we're going to get ready to serve up here. Okay. So let's move this out of the way. We can do it right here. I got to get a ladle for our soup because you want to get all of that delicious broth in there. Okay. So we have our salami and Gouda melts. And then we're going to ladle up our delicious Italian wedding soup with chunks of carrots, homemade veal meatballs, spinach, orzo. And what I love to do with this soup is just top it off with a little bit of Parmesan. It just plays really well with those flavors. And then, of course, we will have a delicious banana muffin made with our sourdough discard for dessert. So guys, super easy meal today. We made our sourdough. We made our salami melts on our homemade sourdough. That's what we baked up last night. We have our Italian wedding soup with the delicious veal meatballs and our banana muffins. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, show you what we're making for our family, what we're cooking and eating, and hopefully teach you guys something. Again, all of our videos will be uploaded to the link on our page, so you can always go back and rewatch them and make them along with it. Again, thanks so much. Don't forget to like and subscribe.